Hi, creative friends. Thank you so much for being here. And once again, I am going to talk about Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes and her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. So thank you so much for joining me here. And it's really cold outside. So again, I feel like we're having a hot cup of tea in front of the fireplace. And I want to just first of all address something that happened in my last video. And when I started making this video series, I journaled about it and I wanted to present the most accurate, authentic, honest, true, and in alignment with who I am version of an accounting of what I had learned from this book. So I decided that I was not going to edit anything. I was going to leave everything as is in my videos because I deeply feel in my bones that that is where all of the gold lies, not only for somebody watching this video, but for me too. So what happened in my last video is I was talking about friendship or a relationship when we are not in alignment with who we are and we are stuck in a friendship or a relationship or whatever. And in my last video, I actually let out a Freudian slip because I said, oh, and if we're stuck in a friendship, and then I backtracked and I said, well, I don't mean to say we're stuck. But when I was listening to the video, because I listen to all of my videos before I post them, I had an aha moment and I was like, but you know what? When we're not in alignment with who we actually are stuck, but we don't feel like we're stuck or we don't know that we're stuck. But that is exactly what happens. So it was such a teachable moment for me to realize that I was like, oh, okay. And I want to talk about it. I want to share about it because I think maybe a lot of us do experience this. So getting back to the book. So in my last video, I talked about um, it's before she even gets to the book, she talks about singing over the bones. And that is in the introduction. So it's singing over the bones. And basically, Dr. Estes talks about um, when we get to a place in our lives where we are not in alignment with who we are and we are depressed chronically, I mean, we are depressed, we can't show our emotions, we're stuck, we hand over our life force to somebody else or some kind of a belief system that is not ours. And when we get to that place of just being chronically in a small place, that's when we have lost the wild women within ourselves, which is our instincts, which is our intuitive self. So getting back to what I was saying in my last video, just say that, I'm in a relationship, and this has happened to me more times than I can count, because I do believe that we keep on learning the lesson until, situations keep on showing themselves to us until we learn the lesson. That's how we learn the lesson. So I have just constantly found myself in relationships where I wasn't being treated well. I couldn't be myself because, my belief systems were false. My belief systems were built on a swamp. It was faulty. It wasn't true. It did not serve me. They were toxic. They kept me quiet. They kept me in a place where um, I couldn't articulate myself. And it wasn't because I didn't have the words to articulate myself, but because I didn't feel safe to articulate myself. So when I was a child, I was in an environment where it was extremely abusive, extremely patriarchal, very toxic, everything was built on deception and lies, whereby the number one thing that everyone cared about was appearances. And, maybe some of that is a cultural thing. But some of it definitely was very, very much a familial belief pattern, like a generational belief pattern. So I think there was some overlap between, say, my family of origin, and then generational um, traumas, and then you add culture into the mix. But my point is that everything was built upon lies and deception and appearances. Like, everybody only cared about what something looked like. Nobody cared about what was really going on. And belief systems were more important than any individual person. And what I mean by that is, um, so when we grow up in our families of origin, whatever culture or whatever that family might be, everybody has their belief systems. And most of those belief systems are part of the collective unconscious, as Carl Jung talked about. So we all have belief systems. And sometimes those belief systems are so rigid and so toxic that everything else gets lost in the mix. So I'll give you an example. For instance, like for me, for instance, I grew up in a very patriarchal um, family system and society and culture, etc. So what happens is there are all these toxic beliefs that everybody has, the females as well as the males in the family. It's not just the males that have these toxic belief systems, it's everybody in the whole system has these beliefs. And so those beliefs become more important than, anybody in the family, anybody in the environment. And then when I built my house on that swamp, on that very faulty foundational system, that didn't work for me. And I didn't know that it was a swamp. I didn't know it was faulty. It took me many, many years um, to figure that out, to learn that, to unlearn it. First, I had to be able to identify it, and then I had to be able to unlearn it. And so I did find myself in a lot of relationships that, were very faulty. They were built on my false belief system. And then I ended up being stuck in these relationships for, you know, years, decades, because I was not in alignment with who I am. And what I've realized is that if we lose somebody by speaking our truth, or if we lose a friendship, a relationship, an opportunity, etc., we're really not losing anything. We're actually gaining something. We are gaining alignment with who we are. We are gaining our self-trust. We are gaining our self-love. So for me, it required for me to first understand these belief systems that I had, to really look at them. And I have talked about this before on my Instagram account, because I did a recovery series where, like, I would just talk about my recovery. And my belief system in the beginning, it was like I had this huge yarn, um, ball of yarn, and it was huge. It was like just really, really big. Okay. And it was all tangled up. And that was my belief system. It was so tangled up. Like, I couldn't tell, where it started, where it ended. It was just a big mess. And it was really, daunting, to say the least, for me to look at this huge ball of yarn that I had no idea where to begin unraveling it all. But what I found is, and that was my belief system, this ball of yarn, metaphorically speaking, that was my belief system. So what I found is that when I started tackling the big beliefs, like the really big ones, okay, so I'll give you an example. What is love? That is a huge belief. I mean, because, that determines everything. It determines how we treat ourselves first and foremost. It determines how we live our lives, what kind of relationships we allow into our lives, how we um, show up in those relationships. I mean, I would say that is a huge foundational belief. What is the definition of love? So, because I grew up in a very toxic, abusive, patriarchal environment, family system, I had a very distorted view of what love is. It was wrong. It was just outright wrong. It involved all these beliefs that not only were they wrong, but they didn't serve me in the least. They served the people and the systems who created these beliefs, but it certainly wasn't me. So, beliefs such as, well, you should always put others first. You should, always show up in a certain kind of a way. You should play small so that, you don't disturb anything, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was operating on a very false um, assumption of what love was. And then when I tackled like the big ones, then I really had to sit down. I had to say, okay, what is love? What was I taught love is? And what do I define love to be? And I get to define it. I get to write it down. I get to figure it out. I get to, um, you know, create my understanding of what love is. So once I did that with the big beliefs, then a lot of the smaller beliefs just kind of crumbled away because you have these big beliefs like, okay, what is love? And then you have the smaller beliefs that are kind of piled up on top of it. So once you just dismantle the big beliefs, it is very daunting in the beginning, but don't be discouraged if you are doing this, because once you tackle the big beliefs, the small beliefs crumble away. So that was how what I did and how I approached it. But I'm really glad that, that I did have that kind of um, uh, realization when I made the video that, I said, oh, when I'm stuck in these relationships. And then I said, oh, I don't mean to say I'm stuck in the relationships, but actually, I really was stuck in these relationships. I was stuck in these relationships by my own faulty belief systems. And that was like a huge aha moment for me. So, anyways, getting back to Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and that's basically what she is talking about, in my opinion, in the prologue to the book, which is Singing Over the Bones. Okay, so bones in Jungian psychology, the symbolism of bones is, it is our psyche. It's everything. It's the everything that keeps us together, but it's also unseen. So in Jungian psychology, bones represent the hidden unconscious mind, the psyche, all our belief systems that we are unaware of. They're hidden in our unconscious mind. So when Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, when she talks about singing over the bones, what she is talking about is, in my experience of her readings and what I understand, what she's talking about is to sing over the bones, meaning to shine a light on what is hidden, to shine a light on the unconscious. And where we can get our clues from are things like I was talking about, like what she says. She says, hey, if you're stuck in chronic depression, in always having to bite your tongue, you can never speak the truth, you can't be who you are, you have to go into hiding. And so many people, women especially, do this for years and years and years. And sometimes their entire lives. They go into hiding, they get married, and they completely subvert who they are in their marriage. They can't show up as being true human beings. They have to, play small. They have to set aside the things that they want to do. And a story that comes to mind is, and I don't know where I read it, but I remember it was just so heartbreaking and so sad. But there was a lady who lived somewhere in the Midwest. and she was somebody's grandmother. And so the granddaughter was writing a story about her grandmother, and the grandmother had passed. And the story about the grandmother was that she had gotten married fairly young to a farmer in the Midwest of America. And she, had a whole bunch of children, lived her life on the farm, but she was like from a big city like Chicago or something like that. But she married this farmer from the Midwest, and then she left everything and she, spent her whole life in the Midwest. But every so often, like, once a year or once every 5 years or whatever, she would put on her fancy city coat and she would take the train up to Chicago, and she would just spend a day just, soaking everything in and, just being a city girl. And that's what she yearned for her whole life. And the granddaughter was writing about it in the sense of, she saw the grandmother's coat that she would wear to Chicago, but now her grandmother had passed away. And I really, really wish I knew who had written this story or the name. I just don't remember any of it, but I do remember the story. And um, I remember just feeling this sense of just such sadness that this was the only way this woman could live. Um, what made her happy was just this, once one for one day or for a few hours, once a year or once every 5 years or whatever it was, she would go to the city and she would, like, do all the things that made her happy, like maybe walk down the street and have, just go window shopping or whatever it was she did. But her whole life, she just spent it, subverting what she really wanted and who she really was. And all that was left of it was the coat that she wore. And it was just such a reminder of, how women, especially, can subvert who they are for their entire lives. And, anyways, I wanted to read a little excerpt here of what Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes says. And I have to just get my glasses here. So I just want to read this. And she's talking about the wild woman within us. To find her, it is necessary for women to return to their instinctive lives, their deepest knowing. So let us push on now and remember ourselves back to the wild soul. Let us sing her flesh back onto our bones. Shed any false coats we have been given. Don the true coat of powerful instinct and knowing. Infiltrate the psychic lands that once belonged to us. Unfurl the bandages, ready the medicine. Let us return now, wild women howling, laughing, singing up the one who loves us so. For us, the issue is simple. Without us, wild woman dies. Without wild women, we die. Para vida. For true life, both must live. Oh my goodness, I just love this. I love this lady. I love her work. I am so utterly grateful that I have access to this book and have for years. So thank you so much for joining me by the fireside. I hope that you are enjoying this series. I hope it is resonating with you. I really appreciate and enjoy all of your questions, comments, and feedbacks, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.